has a right to vote and a right to be represented at every level of government. We simply don't have it. And for that reason, there are actually millions of disenfranchised people in America, if you think about it. Starting with the people right down the road in D.C., 500,000 people who have no voting representation in Congress, 5.5 million citizens who were convicted of felonies, who went to jail, who did good time, who got out, who remained disenfranchised in 9 or 10 states. Now, we dealt with that back in 2007 here.
Senator Britt's amendment, she sat right there.
Yeah.
And
we actually amended it because before Senator Blunt left, and Senator Blunt left in 2002, we dealt with it, but we were trying to actually fix it in terms of the requirements, and that was 0607.
That's absolutely right. And we went all the way with Senator Britt's
Yes.
legislation. I was very proud. That was one of the first votes I cast here. So
Yes.
we did it, but there are some states like Florida where more than 1 million people are disenfranchised.
Yes.
Okay, so, and then there are lots of other categories, but I won't detain you on that. The Supreme Court has said in 2000 in Bush versus Gore, there is no constitutionally protected individual right to vote in presidential elections. And in Richardson versus Ramirez, the court rejected the attack on felon disenfranchisement, again saying there's no universal right for everybody to vote. And the D.C. residents, when they went to court in Alexander versus Daly, got back the same answer, which is if there were a right to vote and be represented, you'd be fine, but it depends on your state legislature granting you the right to vote. Okay, so that's problem number one. Then we get to the problem of Citizens United, which absolutely capsized 3 or 4 prior Supreme Court precedents and dozens of state and federal laws to determine that corporations suddenly enjoyed the political free speech rights of the people. And so I think we need to keep the train of constitutional progress moving. And here's how we do it in America. There are 2 ways you get a constitutional amendment according to Article 5 of the Constitution. One is you get a 2/3 vote in the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate. They send it out to the states for 3/4 of the states to ratify. The other is 2/3 of the states call for a constitutional convention, an amendments convention. You have an amendments convention, and then once an amendment passed out of that convention, it's sent back to the states, and 3/4 of the states need to ratify. Okay. Now, in our history, we've always used path number 1. But we need to understand that path number 1 and path number 2 are kind of intertwined, because there have been calls for constitutional conventions, dozens of them, from the states that Congress responds to by taking a vote, saying, hey, the states are serious, they want to move. For example, the 17th Amendment, which shifted the mode of selection of U.S. senators from the legislatures to the people, all the states were calling for a constitutional amendments convention, and Congress said, let's just go ahead and pass it, and we'll send it out there. Similar kinds of things are taking place with the 19th Amendment, women's suffrage, and so on. We know nothing is happening in Washington. People are despairing about our politics. House of Cards is beginning to look like a documentary. And I don't want to spoil the plot for anybody, but people understand that the floodgates have opened, as President Obama said, on not millions, not billions, but trillions of dollars potentially from the corporate sector into our politics. How can any of us ever hope to compete with that? And as I'm watching my friends from local governments come up here and beg for the tiniest bit of relief, I realize we're tying ourselves up in knots over trivia at the local level when the whole democracy is being threatened by virtue of multinational corporations which are able really to intervene and thwart the meaning of popular participation in our politics. And so I know calling for a constitutional convention is unorthodox. We have not done it since I've been in the General Assembly, although it's happened many, many times before in our state and in other states, and we have obviously ratified constitutional conventions many times. We recently ratified the 17th Amendment, which had been a kind of historical oversight. We hadn't done it, but not only can we and may we think of ourselves as constitutional actors and citizens, I think we've got to think of ourselves as constitutional actors and citizens, because we know that Washington is stuck in complete gridlock and paralysis. And where is change going to come from? It's going to come from the states. So with that, I would simply submit to my colleagues that we take a very serious look at taking our constitutional responsibilities seriously in this session. And with that, I submit it to your wisdom and hope to bring up the witnesses.